Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Mr. Speaker, well, I think we've had a medical breakthrough here in the House tonight. I think for all those insomniacs out there, they won't need to go to their local GP for sleeping pills. They'll just put on a tape that is endless of John Hayes' sort of a loop tape of John Hayes' dulcet tones talking about the tax bill. I got to say that it was an extraordinary contribution by Mr. Hayes. Mr. Hayes said that if the Labor government got in, we'd be sort of borrowing and spending. But in his own sort of Les Patterson-like unique way, he forgot, or maybe he hasn't had enough sleep, he forgot to mention, of course, that his crew are borrowing $300 million a week to fund a tax cut. And he also talked about, the words he used were, taxes about shifting from the rich to the poor resources were the sort of words he made. But he forgot to mention that on top of the $300 million per week that his government is borrowing, he forgot to mention that, of course, the so-called tax switch, which is the tax swindle by this government, gave the top 10% 44% of the tax, and the top 20% got what? 2%. So poor old Sir Les Patterson hadn't got the abacus out, hadn't worked out, using all his fingers and toes, exactly what the tax switch had done for New Zealanders. The top, those earning the most, got the most, and those earning the least got basically zip. So I say to John Hayes, use all your fingers and toes. We'll even supply some batteries for the calculator, or I don't know, another abacus if it's broken. I say to John Hayes, try again. Go out and get the standard 4 old-fashioned maths textbook. Work out how to add, divide, subtract, etc. Work out percentages and have another crack. And then he can come back into the House, have another speech, and send the rest of us to sleep again. Well done, I say, because he's an example of the ineptitude exhibited by this government. You know when they're in trouble because they sent the big heavy hitters in, seriously heavyweight hitters, some of them, into the House to defend the tax bill. Using the Maggie Barry principle, I can't comment on that. Jerry Brownlee probably can, of course, and maybe our friend Parakura, our good mate, but I certainly can't. I'm a shadow next to John Hayes. But I say this, this bill is interesting because other colleagues have pointed out that it is tinkering. Dr. Clark on our side pointed out that the IRD computer system has been around since 1992. And I'll give members an example of how this computer system is inefficient and why this government should have done something about it. We all pay tax on interest on deposit, right? And that is an automatic process. It's deducted. The tax on interest is deducted from your account, goes to the IRD, but then you get your tax statement if you want to request one, and there is not, and I've taken this up with IRD a number of times actually, there is not a line item that says tax on interest. Because what you then have to do in theory, unless you want to just gamble and say you've paid your tax, and most people don't do anything about it because the tax has automatically gone in, but technically you can ring the IRD, advise them, or send in your tax certificate from your bank, and they'll send another statement out and generate it and put the line item in. Irrelevant, actually, because you have paid your tax. It's an automatic thing if you've given the bank your IRD number. And even if you haven't, you're on the top rate. So, why is this the case? Because the IRD computer system can't reconcile the fact they've got the money from Bank A, the bank has sent them the money, Mr Hayes' his tax on interest has been sent through, but they can't reconcile it through their technology so it appears in your statement. Now, how stupid is that? Now, there's something, actually, because taxpayers want to be reassured that they have, 99% of them, they have complied with the law and actually paid all their tax, and most do, of course. But there's an inefficiency and something that could have been worked on. But I just make this point. In Labor, when we talk about debt and when we talk about taxes, another sort of history lesson for Mr Hayes that he sort of forgot in his sort of laconic way is that, of course, when we left office, Mr Hayes, we left office with net Crown debt being zero. Now, you'll find a zero. If you go back to the old Standard 4 maths textbooks, you'll find out what a zero looks like, Mr Hayes. Have another crack. Zero. Yep, yeah, well, that's right. Have a look at the scales. There'll be a zero on there. Just don't jump on, Johnny. The second thing is that we had 9 years of surpluses. 9 years of surpluses, of course. That's the legacy we bequeathed this bunch of tired, inept, ministers and members of parliament who now run the country. That's what we bequeath them. Net Crown debt, 0, and 9 years of surpluses. And the record of this, now we come to you in a minute, the record of this government, of course, is $300 million a week in borrowings and 44% of the tax cuts going to the top 10% and the bottom 20, those on Struggle Street, who Mr Hayes, of course, has never bumped into in his electorate. He wouldn't know the bottom 20% if he fell over it. The bottom 20% get 2%. And what's the great tax reform they hit us with in the budget? They even dealt to the old paper boys. Yeah, they even put the boot in to the old paper boys. Now, I don't know if John Hayes was ever a paper boy. You know, they cycle around, maybe on a penny farthing he was. I don't know if he was ever a paper boy. Bit of exertion, you know, running around delivering papers. He may not have even embarked on it. He might have been a pizza delivery man, who knows. But they probably get paid. They probably get paid more. But his James
came back for approach to delivering pizza. Never made it to the destination.
Indeed. Forgive him, Mr. Speaker. But that's John Hayes' legacy, and that's his government's legacy. So, and then we look at KiwiSaver. This was, of course, a proposition that the National Party in opposition opposed bitterly, utterly opposed. And they've opposed it, and they've tinkered with it, and they've made changes to it, and making changes to a superannuation scheme, multiple changes in a short period of time, as these geniuses have done. Ask anybody in international finance, they'll tell you that actually that undermines people's confidences in that superannuation scheme. I worked in Australia in around 1995, and I remember the then Prime Minister, John Howard, made substantial changes to what is a pretty gilt-edged superannuation scheme that the general public in Australia, because it's compulsory super there, enjoys. And there was a hue and cry about it. Of course, it's compulsory, so you can't sort of not be a part of it. But where you don't have a compulsory scheme, of course, people say, hang on, they're changing the rules. We're not going to be part of this. We're not confident that some future crew, this mob of course, will come in and next year have another tinker and another change and undermine confidence again. Because the truth is, this mob, Mr. Speaker, and they are a mob, an outfit, they're not a real political party, they're a mob. This crew over here don't really believe in KiwiSaver. They never have. They've got it because we put it in, and because there is universal acclaim that people want it. You know, people love it. And they, just like, of course, they wanted to put the teacher class ratios, teacher pupil ratios up, but they didn't do it because the people got to them and said, no, we're not going to accept it. Yet they still say, of course, that they were right to do it, which means they'll probably do it again. No principle, sir, no principle, no backbone, and these are the sort of tinkering around the edges sorts of things that, these are the sort of tinkering around the edges sort of policies that we have from this government. As it implodes, sir, and as it becomes...
A point of order, the Honourable.
No, it's something I expected the government to do, sir, and I would have thought that you would have intervened, sir. It's long been a breach of the Speaker's rulings in this House to suggest that members opposite lack backbone, sir. And for that to go unchallenged, I think is inappropriate, and if the government won't stick up for itself, then I will.
I withdraw. Oh. And I want to thank Trevor Mallard for that redemption speech. It's always, when you've got Trev behind you, you know you're on, oh, Trev's got a backbone, cast iron, titanium. And there's a few around this place that might be able to strengthen their sort of backbones by adopting our colleagues' philosophy on life. Because, thank you. No, I appreciate that, and I've never said a bad word against Trevor Mallard at all. But anyway, so finally, I want to say the final. I may have misled the House. Yes. The final thing I want to say is I want to address some of Mr. Goldsmith's comments very briefly in just simply saying this: that for that man to talk about debt when he was a councillor under John Banks's mayoralty that trebled the debt of the Auckland City Council is extraordinary. This is the man, of course, Mr. Goldsmith, who wrote 2 books, one on Don Brash gone, and one of Mr Banks, well, hanging by a thread, and the next one that is due to come out, given that he's so overworked he has time to write a book, will, I suspect, be the rise and fall of John Banks, or perhaps, sir, perhaps, and we wait with bated breath, it could well be the political obituary of Mr Banks.
David Bennett.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.